the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
This is Dan Gingis, the experience maker, and you are tuning in to the Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. And that is the man himself, the experience maker himself, Dan Gingis. He is going to be our guest for today. And of course, my name is Joshua. I am your host. Every week, every day, every episode, we start off with a question. And today's question is, what is the secret ingredient to turning customers into loyal fans? Well, Dan is the perfect man to answer that question. Dan, he's our guest for today, and our guest has spent 20 years as a marketing and customer experience leader at companies like McDonald's, Discover, and Humana. He's been named one of the world's top 30 customer experience professionals by global gurus, and his most recent book ranks number 4 on Book Authority's top customer experience book of all time. He's a licensed bartender, a pinball wizard, and a lover of rescue dogs and cats. And he once delivered a pizza to Michael Jordan. We need to talk about that one. Please welcome customer experience speaker and author Dan Gingis. Thank you for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. I'm excited to be here. Happy to talk about MJ or anything else that you'd like today.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about the experience, right? And that's quite the unique experience. And it's a perfect opening question to the show because I always talk about origin story. What was the young Dan Gingis like? And how did he end up delivering pizza to Michael Jordan?
So it's funny because in hindsight, I realized that this was one of my very first customer service experiences. And I didn't know necessarily then that it would kind of mold me. But Michael is actually a fan of Domino's Pizza, which is where I worked in high school and in some of college. It was one of my favorite jobs. I got to do everything from answer the phones to make the pizzas to delivering the pizzas. And he was a pretty frequent customer. And what was interesting is when he called and ordered, he would call himself oftentimes. And if it was a pepperoni and sausage pizza, then you knew it was for him and he was going to answer the door. That's the one you liked. If it was a cheese pizza, that was usually the housekeeper ordering for the kids and he was at an away game or something. So that was no good. And so there was a day where I actually answered the phone. There was Michael on the other line ordering his pepperoni and sausage pizza. And it was a quiet night. So I also got to deliver it. And when I got to his door, he opened the door, and of course, he's very tall. I am not very tall. But the first thing that I noticed was that he was looking over my head behind me to see if anyone else was there, to see if there was paparazzi or anybody that shouldn't be there. And I had already been told by the other drivers that you could ask him for an autograph and he would give you one, but then he wouldn't tip. But if you didn't ask for an autograph, he was a really good tip. And so I'm thinking to myself, I want the money, right? Like I'm a high school kid. I need the spending money. So I had already decided I wasn't asking him for an autograph. But it was at that moment when I saw his initial reaction, which was to look over my head, where I realized that's the only answer. Like he deserves to have privacy when he orders a pizza and not have somebody bother him for an autograph. And so even if I had come in thinking I'm getting the autograph, that would have changed my mind. And again, I think that is a big element of customer experience is being able to pivot and pay attention to what's going on with your customers. And in this case, I could tell what the right answer was. And all these years later, because this is when I was a kid and I'm not a kid anymore, I still get the story, right? So the story was worth way more than the autograph. He was a very good tipper, I can tell you that. And so it was all great.
Wow, I mean, that's quite the experience too. And like you said, this pretty much catapulted or kickstarted your customer experience journey. Dan, it all started with Michael Jackson. Not many people can say
Jordan,
that.
Michael
Michael,
Jordan.
sorry, Michael Jordan.
I would have
Michael
liked to have
Jordan.
met Michael Jackson, but I never met him.
Well, Dad, talk to us about this, the customer experience journey this time. What was the pivotal moment in your journey where you got into this industry, and when did you start calling yourself the experience
Baker.
maker?
Yeah. So I actually was a marketer for most of my career. I got my start in direct mail, believe it or not, putting together beautiful brochures and letters and envelopes to mail to people to try to sell them stuff. And eventually grew into the digital channels. I ran social media teams, email teams, search engine optimization teams, etc. And then I got recruited into a role while I was at Discover, which is a US-based credit card company. I got recruited into a role that was called the head of digital customer experience. And I went to the person who recruited me. He was the chief digital officer. And I said, man, I'm flattered that you are interested in me for this role, but I don't understand why. I'm a marketer. What do you want me to do? I don't even know what customer experience is. And he said, this was 2012. So he was very forward looking. He said, I've watched you in business meetings and I've noticed that you are always the person that is wearing the customer hat. You are always the person that is trying to solve a business decision through the lens of the customer. And we need to do that more in the digital space, because his prediction, and he turned out to be right, he said, digital experience and customer experience are going to become the same thing in not too long. And so we need to do better. We need to do better in the digital area. And I went to this role and I just was a sponge. I just learned it, really fast. And I loved how impactful even the smallest changes were. And so there'd be a situation, just as an example, where I worked really closely with the customer service team. I had a counterpart on the team, and she and I'd have a meeting and she'd say, listen, we're getting a lot of calls about this page on the website. And people are confused or something's not working or what have you. So I'd go in, we'd fix the page, and all of a sudden the calls would go away. Now, that doesn't seem like a real big deal till you realize that every call cost us almost $8. And so now hundreds of calls went away. And if you multiply that by 365 days of the year, like one little change on the website, I just saved the company tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was like, whoa, what if I could do this at scale? What if I could do this, multiple times over? Which is exactly what I started doing. Is I started getting rid of every little pesky problem that was annoying customers. And then we turned our eyes to, now that we've gotten rid of the annoying stuff, how do we make it great? How do we make it memorable? How do we make it so people want to talk about us? And I just fell in love and I became very passionate. So I continued on in corporate America for a bunch more years after that. And I left in 2019. And I decided that was the time that I wanted to go off on my own and do something myself. And I hired a business coach, and she and I I remember sitting on her couch looking at URLs to see different brand names that were taken already and that, that were available. And then we hit on the experience maker, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. Like that's who I am. And that's what I want to teach other people to be. And then we went off and running, and that's sort of been the brand since then. And I've really loved it.
And the rest is history. But of
It
course,
is.
today also, this is it. You here are joining us as the experience maker yourself, because I love it. Because I mean, customer experience, you built it for brands, small businesses, but Dan, you're also a licensed bartender on the side, aren't you? I want to ask this because, Dan, if customer experience was a cocktail, what would be the missing ingredient that most companies overlook when it comes to creating the perfect customer experience?
Wow, what a great question. I got to tell you, Joshua, I've been on a lot of podcasts. I have never been asked that question before. That's magnificent. Recently, my drink of choice has been ranch water, which is tequila as a base and then club soda. And one of the reasons I moved to it is I really used to like gin and tonics, but as it turns out, tonic water has a lot of sugar in it. And I've been on a low sugar diet lately. So I had to find something else. But what I like about both of them are the bubbles. And I drink a lot of seltzer water during the day. And so I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with the bubbles is really the missing ingredient, because bubbles are moving, they're refreshing, they are change the whole complexity of a drink. When they're flat, when you get a gin and tonic that's flat, you notice because it doesn't taste good. And so those bubbles, they're just air, but they make a big difference, right? And the other thing I love is that they're small, and I'm a huge believer that it is the little things in customer experience that matter.
Wow,
And
I
where
love that.
companies make a mistake is where they spend millions of dollars on some multi-year transformational project to get their experience better, when sometimes all it takes is just making a better cocktail. It's just doing it a little bit better, making small changes that enhance the experience. And as I explained before, making small changes that reduce the irritants. When you can do both of those things, you're going to be great at customer experience. So that's where I'm going. I'm going with the seltzer water as my answer.
Seltzer water, the refreshing water, the small things that make it smoother, make it more, like pop a little bit. And you talk about reducing the friction as well, because you don't want customers to go through a process where you actually working against you. If the experience, making it easier for them is the goal, is the key. We build different customer experiences again for different brands, small businesses. Should this time is strategies when it comes to customer experience, when it comes to B2C and B2B. They differ when creating customer experiences for them. And are there parts where they overlap?
So I actually believe, somewhat controversially, that they are way more similar than they are different. And the reason I
Please.
believe that is that if you're a B2B, yeah, you sell to businesses, but truthfully, you're not selling to a building. You're not selling to an entity. You are selling to a person. There's a buyer at the other end, or maybe it's a committee of buyers, right? And those people, guess what? They're consumers, and they shop at Amazon, and they go to restaurants, and they, go to movie theaters or amusement parks. They are a consumer. And so whether you like it or not, and maybe this isn't fair, but it's reality, is that when this person is purchasing software from you or some other service, they are looking at the other experiences that they have had as a consumer, as a guide that sets their expectations. So if they went out the night before with their partner and they had an amazing meal and everything, the food was great, the service was terrific, and the atmosphere was perfect, and everything was so memorable, guess what? When they go buy software from you, they want the same thing. They want it all to work really well and to feel good. And so I always tell B2Bs, you should be more like B2Cs. Instead of the typical answer that I get, which is, well, we're a B2B.
Yes,
That's different.
precisely.
I say, really, how much different is it? And because again, if we were selling to a building or a non-human entity, then sure, it would be way different. But we're not. We're selling to people. And at the end of the day, customer experience is about relationships. It's about how you make people feel. And whether you are selling $1 million software platform or a $1 hamburger, it's the same thing. Is that people want, you mentioned it, people want it to be easy. They want it to be fast. They want it to be convenient. And they want, even better, for it to be somehow memorable.
I love it. Memorable is the key there. Dan, I want to highlight that right away. What is it that makes you talk about the little things that make things refreshing? But this time around, what are these things that you can put into customer experience strategies that make it memorable?
So I have a methodology that I call WISE, and WISE is an acronym. It stands for witty, immersive, shareable, and extraordinary. And I'll quickly tell you about all four of them because
Please.
that is what makes memorable experiences. Witty is about adding a little bit of fun, a little bit of whimsy, a little cleverness to your language. It's not
Right.
about being super funny, because humor can be a little bit dangerous. Something that one person finds is funny, somebody else might take offense to. So it's not really that, but it is showing the humanity behind your brand and being a little bit more fun, and might be using emojis in an email. It might be putting something funny on a sign if you have a physical location. It's little things, but it's every single time we communicate, there's an opportunity to just be more fun. And I've even done workshops with rooms full of lawyers where I've said, okay, I get it. You guys aren't really the fun guys, right? Because you're the lawyers. But you know what? When I gave them a chance to be creative, they were unbelievably creative. And they were starting to think about, well, if the goal of legal disclaimers is to protect the company, but also to get the customer to understand what they're purchasing, what if we did a better job of that second part? What if we actually did a better job of making sure the customer understands what they're signing up for? We would write it differently. We would write it more fun. We would write it as a story. We would write it as, with humor. And so that's the witty piece. And that absolutely, when you see something witty, I take pictures of signs all the time, but so do other people, right? You see a funny sign, you want to share it with somebody. Secondly is immersive. And immersive is about creating experiences that appeal to one of the five senses or to someone's emotions, because those are the kinds of experiences that we tend to remember. And if you think about to one of your favorite childhood memories, chances are either you felt something, be an emotion, or you can still remember what something looked like or smelled like or tasted like or sounded like, because those are the things that get imprinted on our brain. So if we can proactively create experiences that have those sensations, they're going to be more. The third is what I call shareable. And that one seems a little bit obvious, but if you look at the kinds of experiences that people share, it doesn't happen by accident. And it doesn't happen because we ask people. So you've probably seen various places, you see somebody that says, well, don't forget to tag us on Instagram and use our hashtag. And here's a selfie spot and, whatever. And a friend of mine likes to say, if you have to tell someone it's a selfie spot, it probably isn't, right? Because selfies are spontaneous. So creating a shareable experience means being very intentional about what do you want your customers to share. If you could draw up their Instagram post yourself, what would you do? What would it be a picture of? And then how do we make it so that there's a moment where it is so obvious to them to pick this thing up, to do something with it, that we don't even have to ask them, that it just happens naturally. If you think about the number of times in a week that you pull out your phone and take a picture or a video of something when no one tells you to, it happens a lot. We can turn that on its side and we can say, what if we create something specifically so people will do that? And then the last piece is being extraordinary. And this one, in some ways, is the easiest. It's just about not being ordinary, because what people don't talk about is anything ordinary. And so you've never heard anybody say, let me tell you about the perfectly average restaurant I went to last night. Because if it was only average, we're not talking about it. So the only things we talk about are really great experiences and really terrible experiences. And so in order to get to that great, we can't be ordinary. We have to be extraordinary. And the good news is that extraordinary is usually just a little bit of an improvement. It's not giant leap. It's not spending millions of dollars. It's not bringing Beyonce in for a private concert. It's taking an experience and just making it a little bit better than everybody else. And that will make it memorable as well.
Witty, immersive, shareable, extraordinary. But Dan, I understand there's another letter that people can find on your website. And that's
you've done your research.
Absolutely.
When
R
you become,
stands for, go ahead.
So when you become wise to the power of customer experience, what's going to happen is people are going to talk about you more. They may talk about you in social media. They may share their story with friends and family or colleagues or coworkers, which is going to generate referrals. This is all good. We want to be part of that conversation, especially in social media. And so the R is about being responsive. And that means that when somebody takes the time out of their day in social media to post something about how much they love your brand, it means getting onto social media and responding back and saying, we love you too. And if they take the time to write you a question or even a complaint, it's about being there and answering that question and responding to that complaint. The people that complain want you to solve their problem so they can keep doing business with you. If you ignore their complaint, what are they going to do? Go do business with somebody else. And so responsive is a really important part of it. And what I think so cool about social media, I mean, I grew up, I told you earlier on, I'm older than you are. I grew up in direct mail, right? So I remember the days before social media. What's so cool about social media is it completely changed the game in how consumers engage with brands. Because in the past, if you wanted to talk to a brand, there really wasn't a mechanism to do that. I mean, this sounds sort of nerdy, but you could write them a letter. Like that's how you would do it, right? And all of a sudden now there is this whole world in which you can go and talk to almost any brand on the planet and have a conversation and engage, and they engage back. You know what that does? That drives loyalty. Because when you
That's
have a brand that responds to you, little old you, and you're like, wow, this brand responded to me, you love that brand. You have all the feels for that brand, right? And so my first book, which came out a long time ago, 2017, was all about social customer care and how to be a good engager and responder in social media. And so when I built the WISE methodology, I added the R on there because I didn't want to forget about how being responsive is a key component to the relationship and to the overall experience.
I love that. I think everyone loves that little bit of extra effort where we are part of the dynamic of the communications, right? Because simple message of leaving that, hey, I love it. Hey, thank you for leaving that message behind. We love you too. I think that alone creates super fans. And like you said, that was really my question. And I think that's where we started off. How do you turn loyal customers into like super? Like they're really truly loyal to you. And of course, you also mentioned your book, Dan, but you have a new book, or you have this more recent book that came out 2021. Of course, it's titled The Experience Maker: How to Create Remarkable Experiences that your customers can't wait to share. You talked a little bit about that, of course, with your acronym advisor. Dan, talk to us a little bit about your book. Where can we find it, and where else can we know more about you?
So, yeah, the Experience Maker really shares all of my stories, and each one of those UISER components has real life examples and stories in it from lots of different industries to kind of show you how companies are doing this. Because I've always been a believer that you don't have to listen to me just because I'm on stage doing a keynote or I wrote a book or whatever. Like, don't listen to me. Look at the companies that are successful at this and let's learn from their success, right? And so I set up the methodology, but then I sought out to find examples and stories that really resonate with people to say, man, I could do this in my business. And one of the things I always recommend to people is to look outside your industry because we get very stuck in our own industries. And that's generally not where you're going to find the inspiration. So if you work for, let's say, a plumbing company, you probably spend all day long talking about plumbing. And if you go to a conference, it's a plumbing conference. And your colleagues at work, they're talking about plumbing too. And so spend some time to go learn about restaurants or amusement parks or movie theaters, and then ask yourself, how could this apply to plumbing? How could I create an experience for my customers when I walk into their home that feels a little bit more like an amusement park, or
Wow.
or that brings elements in from other experiences to make it more memorable? Because let's face it, when a plumber comes into our house, we all have a certain expectation of what it's going to be like. And if you can do different from that and better, you're going to be memorable. And then what's going to happen when my neighbor says, hey, you know a good plumber? I'm going to be like, yes, I do. And that's how we grow a business. So that's what the book's about. And it was really fun. I haven't even announced this yet, but I will tell you first, I'm working on a second edition of the book that I hope will come out next year. That'll have even more stories and some new content, because a lot has happened since 2021. We made it through a pandemic. We've got this little thing called AI that's going on and changing everything. And so I felt like it was time for an update. So I'm pretty excited.
The book is The Experience Maker, and the website is dangingis.com. Dan, you truly shared so many secrets on here. I think this is you are the best when the customer experience guest related that I have had. The way you talk about it is just like very precise, very concise, and you've shared so many secrets on here. I truly, truly appreciate it. Dan, where else can we find you? Where else can we connect with you?
Well, first of all, my pleasure. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. I will say one of the things that people say about my book often is they tell me it was a simple read. Now, that doesn't mean it's simplistic. It means it was easy to read. And I love that compliment because I try to write and speak how people talk and listen. I don't use big words. I don't sit with a thesaurus to try to sound smart. I just call it like I see it. And I think that's why people relate to it. I'm at dangingis.com and all of my information is there. My blog is there. All my keynotes are there. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn, posting there quite regularly. And I'd say Instagram after that is where I'm doing a lot of stuff as well. Don't look for me on TikTok. I'm too old for that. I'm sorry. But I'd love to engage with you on other channels.
Well, you heard it here yourself, ladies and gentlemen. Second edition of that book is coming out, and go check out Dan and all of those socials, except TikTok, but you can find him all of his other socials. Dan,
Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. Well, you talked about making the experience maker on TikTok, but maybe they would love to experience you on TikTok someday. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Joshua.
To all our audience and listeners out there, I hope you guys enjoyed this experience today from the experience maker himself. Thank you for watching the episode. We will see you on the next. Bye-bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.